Hello, thank you for joining me again for this special Positive Images Festival poetry workshop. So we have these on every month. We used to, when we were able to, have them in the Central Library in Coventry. But of course, as things are, we've been doing them online. I say this is a special one because it is Coventry Welcomes Week, which ties in with National Refugee Week. And so this is a special celebration of international poets, and the three that poets that we'll be looking at today, I've got translations of their work, so hopefully they might be new to you and you want to go and find out more about them. Otherwise you may have come across one or two of them already, and you can enjoy their work again. So thank you very much, of course, to Positive Images Festival who fund these workshops. Thank you, in this particular case, to Coventry Welcomes Week and City of Culture, who have helped put this video together. And it's just a real privilege to be asked to be part of this. Poetry is my passion in life, storytelling is my passion, and when I can bring that together and share with you poems that I've enjoyed that have come from many different voices from all over, then that's a wonderful thing to be able to do, so thank you very much. We're going to have a few different activities in this. You're welcome to watch a bit of the video, pause it and then do your activity. You're welcome to do a bit and then leave it for a few days or however long you want in between and before coming on to the next activity. This is up to you how you want to do it. It's your workshop. It remains so even though we're not in person. If you could, it would be amazing if you wouldn't mind subscribing to this channel. I'm told that this eventually helps me significantly when putting the videos together, helps spread the word about these sessions, and it also means that if you have enjoyed it, that you will be the first to know when any new content goes up. So if you can just press that subscribe button down below, that would be awesome. Okay, that's the housekeeping done, I think. So when asked to do this session, which was some months ago, that we planned the theme for this one to coincide, as I've said, with Coventry Welcomes Week and National Refugee Week. It just made me think that as people travel, stories travel too. And with this significant increase in the availability of translated works, particularly translated poetry, of course the internet, and our human desire to hear stories and pass our stories on, we have this unique thing where we can gain an insight into other people's lives, or a snapshot of their lives, through the word, spoken word or the written word, and that's a really amazing thing. We can learn about traditions and cultures and different countries that we might never go to or have been to, but we can travel there through the words. It's nice to see how, and it's interesting to see how people's lives and cultures differ from our own. That might be people in our own city who live a street away, it might be somebody who's halfway across the world. But it's also really nice to see the similarities, that humanness that connects us all. And I really hope that that's what you get from this session as well. And when you think of all that, it's no wonder that these poems have travelled, hundreds and hundreds of miles to where we are today. So just to be clear on this, I could have done weeks worth of workshop on this. We're looking at 3 different international poets, 3 translations, so there is a whole thousands and thousands of more poets. There's a whole pool of poets out there from all time and all place for you to discover. So this is definitely not a comprehensive guide to international poetry or translations, but hopefully it will pique your interest. Hopefully it will get you writing and thinking about your own stories. You definitely don't need to be a poet to be doing this. If you are, then I hope it helps you to set your writing off maybe in a different way than you might have thought of. But if you just want to use this for a hobby or a mindful activity, then everyone is welcome. That's the point of poetry, is that it is accessible to all, and it's a way for us to share our thoughts, our feelings, our stories. That's my belief anyway. It might not be the definitive guide. So I would love us to start with a female poet. She writes in Arabic, and this one has been translated into English, so I'm obviously able to access it, and I should imagine quite a few people who are watching won't be able to speak Arabic. If you can, then you can enjoy it twice. But, you know, it means that we can enjoy her words even though we speak a different language. So, this is taken from a book called A Red Cherry on a White Tiled Floor, and if that title hasn't sold it to you already, then I don't know what will. This is the bilingual version. As I've said, it's in Arabic and in English. The original version of this text was published in 1997 in Arabic, which is the poet's native language. And this particular book is a compilation of that book, which has the same title, but also includes another book that was originally called I Look to You. If you're familiar with some of the more modern poets like Amanda Lovelace and Rupi Kaur, who fall into sort of the Insta poet category, then for me, this is your original Insta poet who was doing it before social media had even been invented. If you look at the style, when I read a couple of the poems out, you'll see it's those short, sharp stanzas, it's the short, sharp poems that lead onto the next, and the whole book is a series of poems, real short poems, that really make use of metaphor, but also are completely accessible. You can read it and you can get it and you feel it immediately. So she was very much before her time, in my opinion. And of course, as I always say, you don't have to like all of the poems that I share with you today. The fact is that if you experience something, you make your own mind up which bits you want to find out more about and which you think, okay, I've tried that, that's not for me. So back to our poet, who is Maryam Al-Masari, and I am going to read the first one for you. If I show you just so you can see how it's presented in the book, you'll see what I'm talking about with those short pages. You can also see, I'm rubbish with left and right, on the right is the Arabic and on the left is the English. With this, I still have an appreciation for how it looks on the page, so I really love that we get to see how it appears in its original form, even though, of course, those symbols don't mean anything to me. But because I've got the English, I know what they're going to say. So they don't have titles, as I said to you, you know, they just follow on from each other, and this one is called 12. A minute on my left side, a minute on my right side, a little on my back, a while on my stomach. I spin in emptiness, cold in my bed, cold in my dreams. The thieves of sleep have raided my night. One of them pitied me and left me the morning shining on the table. I love that ending. If you want to go back and listen to it again, then you're welcome to. Also, Maryam Al-Masari has probably recorded it, you know, in a much better way, because it's always nice to hear the original poet, and there are videos that you can find on YouTube and on the internet, so feel free to have a look at those. I really wanted to make a note of the shape of the poem. I mentioned that briefly before, you know, to say how you can appreciate it. To me, in the Arabic, it has the look of a bed, or somebody in a bed, with the shape. And you can imagine, you know, this person tossing and turning. The interesting thing about this, of course, is the first half of the poem is purely movement. It's, you know, making use of those verbs, and the only thing that's happening is the tossing and turning. And that, for me, really, you know, makes it clear how long this person is turning and turning, and how long it feels in the middle of the night. And that is also something that I reckon is quite universal. We all know how it feels to be unable to sleep, to try turning this way, that way, and it not making any difference. You're just finding yourself, you know, stuck in this situation. And then those beautiful last lines. One of them pitied me and left me the morning shining on the table. Beautiful metaphor, which is what Al-Masri does really well throughout the whole of these two, you know, this book and these two books. So if you enjoy that, then hopefully you'll enjoy the next one as well. We're going to go to number 75. And I'll just show you again what that looks like on the page. So we're having a look at this one. And really think about how they make you feel, because that's the beauty of her. It's a quick thing and it makes you feel something. She bequeathed her children a mother who dreams, dances and smiles. A mother who weeps and loves. A mother without money and who doesn't mend socks. A mother who writes poems in a language they don't understand. Again, so short and sharp and to the point, but it hits you. That's how it makes me feel. Again, I'll just get my notes. So I wanted us to have a think about what impression we get of the mother figure. Normally in our workshops we'd have a discussion about this and it wouldn't just be my voice talking, although it isn't just my voice talking, because you probably can hear 3 guinea pigs all trying to have a drink of the water bottle which is in the room. They want to get in on the action. I do apologise. But if you just have some time to have a think of these questions, and then I'll just give you my opinion, and that's all it is because there's never a definitive answer with poetry, and that's sort of the beauty of it, is that it's always about interpretations, and as long as you can say why you think something, then your opinion is valid. So I want us to think about the impression we get of this mother figure in the poem. And I want us to just have a look at the form. So she bequeathed her children a mother who dreams, dances and smiles. They're all quite broad things. We sort of all do those things generally. We dream, we dance, we smile, to varying degrees. But we still get an impression from her. She's somebody who's a bit of a dreamer, which I think is a beautiful trait. Somebody who dances and smiles. She sounds fun, she sounds lovely. And she weeps and loves. So you're getting into this now that, the feelings, the emotions, she feels things deeply. And then the final half of the poem, those final 2 stanzas, they're a lot more specific. She doesn't mend socks. She writes poems in a language they don't understand. And then it just stops there, and there's so much more we don't know about her, but we're left with our imagination to work out who she is. To us, having just read the poem. So here is your challenge. Have a go at writing a poem inspired by that last one that I just read from Maram Al-Masri. What personality traits have you bequeathed to your friends and loved ones? So you might want to do it like she did and write as a mother. You might write it as a grandmother or as an aunt. You might write it just the impact you've had on friends or colleagues. What have you bequeathed them? And again, it doesn't have to be long, it can be. It doesn't have to rhyme, but it can do. This is totally up to you how you choose to do this activity. And what I would love is if you start off quite broad, like our poet did, and then zoom in. So Maram Al-Masri starts off with like laughing, smiling, dancing, dreaming, and then came into, that the mother writes poems in a language the children don't understand. She doesn't fix socks. So they're quite, specific to her character. So really get specific, because that's where the magic comes from in poetry. Okay, if you want to pause the video now and have a go at that activity, I will rejoin you with our next poet. Okay, if you paused the video, welcome back. If you didn't, then welcome back anyway, even though we just spoke a second ago. So, before we move on, I just want to I like to do these little mini bios of the poets that we look at. So I'll just give you the one of the poet that we've previously looked at, and then I'll give you the one of the poet that we're about to look at. These have got far bigger stories than I can give you in a 3-line bio. There's some wonderful articles on these poets if you want to look them up further. I've shared some of them into our Facebook group, which you are welcome to join. If you are on Facebook, you can go and type in Positive Images Festival Poetry Workshops. It's a catchy title, there's only one of us, so you are very welcome to join. You don't have to be from Coventry, you can be from anywhere in the world. That is great, you are very welcome, because just because this is where I'm based, you know, we're fortunate now that we can, thanks to the internet, we can go wherever we want to. So you are very welcome to join that group. But I do urge you to look up these poets further because they've got some amazing stories. So previously we just had a look at, and hopefully you've had a go at writing a poem based on that poem by Maram al-Masri. Maram al-Masri is from Latakia in Syria, but now she then settled in Paris. She studied English literature at Damascus University before starting to publish her poetry in Arab magazines in the 1970s. She's now considered one of the most renowned and captivating feminine voices of her generation. You know, she did a lot of amazing poetry. That's why it's translated into so many different languages. She wrote in Arabic, she wrote in French, and it's been translated as you've just seen. She also during later on in her career went to a lot of the Syrian refugee camps and travelled round and performed her poems to them. So she's very, very passionate about what she does, and she speaks about peace. So that's what we just looked at was from the 90s. She's got a lot of stuff since, so explore her, enjoy. Our next poet is called Zbigniew Herbert. Apologies for that, I've been practicing that and I know I've just messed that up. Let me try that one again. Zbigniew Herbert, that was better. Zbigniew Herbert was a poet, playwright and essayist. He was born in Lwów, a city then in Poland. After World War II, the city became part of Soviet Ukraine and is now called Lviv. During the war, Herbert joined the resistance movement against the Nazi occupation, and so that really is reflected in quite a lot of his work. Again, there's more to him than what I've just read there, so please feel free to go and look him up. Okay. I'm just looking at what poem we're doing next. So, oh yes, this one is this is Herbert's poem. It comes from Being Alive, which is an anthology by Blood Axe. There's currently 3 in this series. There's about to be a 4th as we speak. So keep an eye out for that. These are fantastic because they cover poetry from across the globe, and it's all in English, but many of them are translations. And if you just want to discover some new poets, this is a great way of doing it because it is packed, and you can literally turn to any page and there is a world-class poem on it, and that gives you the opportunity then, if you love it, to go and explore some more about that. So that's the book that I'm reading from, and this particular poem is called Silk of a Soul. And it's translated from the Polish because Zbigniew Herbert wrote in Polish. That was his native language, but obviously it's translated into English so that that people who are English speaking can enjoy it as well. So, Silk of a Soul. Never did I speak with her either about love or about death. Only blind taste and mute touch used to run between us when, absorbed in ourselves, we lay close. I must peek inside her to see what she wears at her centre. When she slept with her lips open, I peeked. And what would you think I caught sight of? I was expecting branches. I was expecting a bird. I was expecting a house by a great lake and silent. But there, on a glass counter, I caught sight of a pair of silk stockings. My God, I'll buy her those stockings, I'll buy them. But what will appear then on the glass counter on the little soul? Will it be something which cannot be touched, even with one finger of a dream? So there's a lot in that, and of course we go into the realms of the imaginary there, which is another wonderful thing about poetry. Let me just find it so I have the right notes for you. So as you'll know in that Herbert a lot of his experiences, he was very much against what the Nazis were doing and the occupation, and a lot of his work came around that. But this is a very personal and intimate piece, I feel, that is quite different from some of his other work. So let's just have a think. Again, as I say, we'd usually discuss this, but let's have a think about breaking down that poem just a little bit, and just really taking it apart and seeing what's in there. So what is happening in the poem? Again, if you want to pause and just have a think about this before I give you an interpretation, then please feel free. What's happening in the poem? How is the poet's imagination used to good effect? So in this, the poet imagines being able to fulfil his desire of knowing his lover's deepest wishes, and he does this by looking into her mouth while she's sleeping. And what is it that we learn from this character, about this character in the first stanza? And why does the poet choose for the character to see these things when his lover's asleep? Why is he surprised by what he sees, and what is his worry for those future desires? As I said, all this is very much open to interpretation. But I would suggest that from that very first stanza, I'll bring the book back so that I know what I'm talking about, which would be unusual, but there we are. In that first bit, never did I speak with her either about love or about death. And never actually has its own line there, right on its own. So that's, a very powerful thing. That's, if something's given its whole own space like that, that's big emphasis on that. Never did I speak with her either about love or about death. And they're two huge things. So in their relationship, they're close. He's watching her sleep, which is, when you're asleep, that's quite a vulnerable thing. It's quite an intimate thing if somebody is watching you or you are watching somebody sleep. Yet they didn't have these big conversations, which of course then you wonder why, why couldn't they, why didn't they, when they obviously care very deeply, or at least he does care very deeply about her, because he wants to know, he wants to be able to make her wishes happen. And he's expecting these huge desires. He's expecting to see when he looks into her mouth and is able to see into her mind that way. He's expecting to see branches and birds and a house by a lake, but instead there's a table with a pair of stockings on it. Again, I said all this has gone into the realm of imagination. It's a bit strange, but you can really think why. Why does he expect to see that? Maybe the house and the lake represents that idea of owning something big, having a status, because you've got your big house and your lake, but actually what she wanted is very small. She wants these pair of stockings, and he declares he's going to buy them for her. But of course then, as soon as he's decided that, he knows that if you fulfill one wish, then it's sort of replaced by another. And his worry is, what if those stockings, which are manageable, which he can achieve to get for her, what if they're replaced by something that is a bit harder to fix or to make better? And then, of course, that's where it leaves us. And again, it leaves us considering that. That's what I made of it. Whether you thought that or not, here is your challenge. I would love it if you could imagine seeing the desires of someone else. Who would it be? Who's if you could look into somebody's mind, essentially, or their mouth as he does, and see their absolute desire in life, their wish, who would you be able to do that with? Who would you want to do that with? Would they even be human? We're very close to animals, aren't we, as a species? We have, as you can hear in my room, we have pets. I'm sure many of you do. So it doesn't have to be a human. As I've said, as Herbert does, use your imagination. And what would you expect to see? And what would you actually see? It will be a better poem if those things are different. Again, it's fictional. It doesn't have to be set in reality. It can be. And you don't have to copy Herbert's choice of looking into somebody's mouth. You can do it in your own way. You can do that if you want to, or you can think how else you might be able to see into somebody's mind and their desires, or their heart really, I suppose. So these insights can be accessed in any way you choose. So set the poem out however you like, just that's your frame. Whose mind would you see into, whose wishes would you see, and how would they be different from what you expect them to be? Okay, I will see you on the next task. Okay, if you paused, welcome back. Again, this is the third sort of section of our workshop, and we are looking again at another poet. Before we go on to that, I always like to include what I call a best practice quote, and that's just sort of an inspiring quote about poetry or writing in general, and I try and tie that in with the theme of each session. So seeing as we're looking at diversity and language and poets from different countries today, then I have hopefully found us a relevant quote for that. So the quote is by Tananarive Due, who is, let me get the bio, a novelist and a creative writing teacher who has also worked as a journalist. She won the American Book Award in 2002 for her novel The Living Blood. She's best known as a film historian, and her particular expertise is in black horror. A two-time finalist for the prestigious Bram Stoker Award, she lives in Nottingham, Washington State with her husband, novelist Stephen Barnes. I would cut these mistakes out, but you know, let's not try and aim for absolute perfection. Nobody's perfect. I want these to come across as you know, as raw and real. So I apologise for my slip-ups. So she lives in Washington State with her husband, who's also a novelist. And her quote that I found for this week is, "Diversity should just be called reality. Your books, your TV shows, your movies, your articles, your curricula need to reflect reality." That's one food for thought. I will leave that one with you. It certainly gave me something to think about. Of course, I know we're doing this as a special session where we're looking completely at international poets. If you've been to my workshops, if you've seen the videos before, you know I try and get in a variety of voices into these, because that's what poetry is about. If you only read about people like you, then you're not going to expand your worldview very far. You're just going to confirm things that you already think, rather than opening your mind to new experiences. So hopefully I do what she's talking about in that, but I'm sure we can all do more of it, and you know, make sure that we're experiencing as much different writing and storytelling as possible. Okay, so the final poet that we are going to have a look at today is Farzina Ongarasinova, who is a Kazakh poet, journalist and translator. Born in December 1939 in Manash village, after graduation she worked as a teacher, then as a principal of rural schools. In 1966 she began a career in journalism. Her first collection of poems, Nightingale, was published in 1967. After that, she published a number of poetic books, both in Kazakh and Russian languages, and during her lifetime she won many awards. Again, go and look her up. She's not as easy to find as much information about as the previous three that I've told you about, you know, the two poets and Dua, who's given us that quote, but there is stuff out there. And I do have to say thank you to Coventry Library Services for the gift of this book. It was a beautiful book, and I was really surprised when in one of our workshops one of the librarians came in and presented me with 2 volumes of one Kazakh poetry and 2 Kazakh prose, and it's been a real treat to find poets and writers that I hadn't come across before, and probably wouldn't have done without this. That's why I'm a big fan of anthologies, especially ones like this. So this one is called The Train Approaches, Heartbeats Outstrip. Basically, it's just the first 2 lines of the poem. I will make sure I've got my questions ready so I know what I'm saying after we've read the poem. But we'll go straight into reading the poem for this. The train approaches. Heartbeats outstrip the wagon's knock on rail junctions. The pink sky's smoke mixing with the engine's steam. Lump in the throat, hair standing on end. We don't know where we are going, or who is saying farewell to whom. So soon? Rehearsing farewell until it finally sinks in. The timid flight of the second hand. The sad siren alerts us that our lives are divided in two. We parted for a month, but it seemed like forever. Goodbye and remember me. Over hell, the sign. Exit to the town. But madness has already grabbed him by the throat, leaving them both grappling in anguish. We acted out our parting like a play. When the moment came, I forgot how to say my lines. Sadly and wordlessly, the conductress made a sign of the cross. The few words remaining were dissolving, fading. Suddenly the train shouts, "It did happen, it did happen, return, 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 return." Again, that might be one you want to rewind and listen back to, because it's packed with images and with feelings and emotions. I'll keep that in my hand so that I refer back to it and don't keep leaning over. The thing I want to point out, because it took me 2 readings to get it, is that madness is personified in that one line. So it's almost its own character. So you've got, what I'm going to assume is a female character, purely because it was written by a female poet, which may be incorrect, and she is saying goodbye to a him. We know that from the poem. And then you've got madness has already grabbed him by the throat, leaving them both grappling in anguish. So with a both, you've then got 3 characters, and the other one is madness, as far as I can see. Grabbing him. We don't know whether it's madness as an anger, madness as in he, sort of feeling crazy and losing control. But there's a lot in that. Again, it's up to you how you interpret it. But that was something I thought, there's both. That's a character. That technique, you may have come across it before, probably have. You might not know it was called personification, is when you give something that's not a human qualities. So in that case, an emotion becomes almost like a character, because madness obviously can't literally grab somebody by the throat, but we know how that feels using that personification. We know how it feels to be grabbed by the throat by an emotion. And I would also like us to have a look at those last lines of the poem. And to me, it just felt like it replicated the moving of a train. It did happen is the first 2 that's repeated. And to me, it just felt like when a train first moves off, that it did happen. Return, 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 return. That's when it's starting to really pick up speed. So again, that's personification. A train can't shout, but the person in the poem, that's how she hears the sound of the train. Maybe it's her own desire. Maybe she feels it's fate talking to her, or really is like she feels that the train is giving her a sign, because that's what she's hearing from its movement as she moves away. And I really love it when writers do that and use sound to replicate the action that is happening. So in this case, a train moving off, replicating her feelings that she doesn't want to leave. We're not clear why she's having to leave. We know she doesn't really want to. So there's, again, as I said, there's a lot to unpack in this poem. Far more than I'm going to go through with you now. So finally, obviously we know they didn't want to part. How did we know that? Because we've got so soon, ? They've rehearsed this farewell. It's like when you don't want to do something, you build yourself up to it, you practice and practice it. And when it does happen, she tries to act out her part, but she says she forgets her lines and she ends up not saying anything. Instead, she sees the conductress making a sign of the cross, which in itself is fairly ominous. And then it says dissolving, fading, before we've got those noises of the train. And again, the action carries on past the poem. So here's your final challenge for today. think about a parting that you have experienced. So in this poem, obviously, two people are parted. Think about one you've experienced. It can be a positive parting. It could be you leaving one place to go somewhere better. Or it could be a difficult parting, like the one in that poem. Have a go at writing a poem based on your own experience. So think about how you felt, what you could see, what you could hear, what you could taste. Really, capture the senses, because that's how you create a well-rounded 3D poem. If it's easier and you want to do a draft in prose, and by prose I just mean like almost like a story or a recount, then feel free to write in prose first and then pick out those significant lines and see if you can create a poem from them. If you want to go straight into writing it as a poem, then do that as well, because we all work differently, so there's no right or wrong way of approaching these activities. Do how you feel is right. So there's your final activity. Before we go, thank you so much for watching. If you want to comment beneath, if you want to comment on the Facebook page, if you want to email me, then absolutely feel free. I am slowly getting around to replying to all of them from last month, which is lovely, because I put them out and suddenly my inbox was filled with people giving me their thoughts on the poems and sharing with me fantastic poems that they had written as a result of the activities, which it makes me feel like I've done my job. So thank you so much for doing that, and I'm really pleased that these workshops have had that effect on you. Share them with people. If people need a written copy of them, get in touch with me or with Positive Images Festival. Our details are on here. And we will sort anyone out who's not on the internet with a written copy. So if there's people in your community or your family or your friendship groups, then let them know as well if they would enjoy this. So thank you very much, if you can subscribe, if you want to subscribe, that would be great. Keep writing, keep being positive, keep reading stories from, just collect stories, be collectors of stories from everywhere and from anyone that you are able to be. Okay, thank you very much and take care.